Hello, I'm ED-SKaR and welcome to another little casual painting session. I've got some bolt-action models that have been sitting around waiting to be painted for a while. The loader for light machine gun. And I've got some troopers. And this is the assistant gunner for one of the the anti-tank rifle. So got these four laying around. I may as well start getting them done. Let's make sure I'm sensibly in frame and at least try to get that in focus, although that seems unlikely. And as you would expect, my first result is getting paint leaking everywhere. Thanks Ravel for the wonderful design that is the cube pots. That's a lump. It's a nice idea, it just doesn't work very well. Right, now that little disaster is out of the way, let's get started. This particular model is a fairly fun one. This is my first sculpted torso. So I've done some milliput sculpting work recently, and most of that has been cloaks for the Tanner First and Only that I've been working on for a while. But I wanted to step up my game, as it were, improve upon some things. the best way to improve is to do. And so I did. In this case, the arms, weapon and head are from the plastic bolt action Soviet infantry by Warlord Games. And as it's plastic kit, there's plenty of spare arms and spare heads, so I've built up the... Actually, I don't think I've finished all of them. I built up so many of them, but I've ended up with all of these extra heads and arms and weapons left over. And it seemed a shame to waste them, and so combining my desire to learn sculpting with my not wanting to waste stuff, it seemed like a sensible idea. I always feel like these very thin rifles from the Warlord Games kits are bent, but you know, looking down it, that's pretty straight. But like from this angle, it kind of looks bent. Not sure why that is. Just an optical illusion. Emulsion is something else. On today's live stream, I will be painting a mini with emulsion paint. Seems like a bad plan. Let's move my paint water away from my drinking water, because that, while funny, is not what I'm going for. Look at that, unmixed. Okay, so just as a little bit of a gentle shadow colour, this is an ochre, so it's kind of a very warm orangey kind of, still fairly light brown, but it's more warm, more orange, and it is, as you can kind of probably just about see, it is a bit darker than the tan. This will be fairly subtle at the moment, but then once I get the wash on all of this, it should allow the wash to have its depth without being too harsh, which often washes can be. Reasonable. Not that the camera could really pick it out, but hey ho. plenty of nice wrinkles and folds in the uniforms here. It's nice to just gently pick them out. Nothing extreme, just a simple, quick, just a line of shadow inside the crease or kind of below the crease if you can. And my brush has decided it is 2 brushes. Usually I get an hour or 2 into painting before it starts to do that, but I'm like 10 minutes in now. So that is not a good start. I do want to get the skin out in this lighter tan. There's a pretty reasonable, fairly light base coat for the Russian skin tones that I've been going for, or rather the skin tones of the Soviet Union. Yeah, this brush is really starting to tear itself apart. What's going on? Stays a point. There will be no points for messy, pointless brushes. A bit of dark, rather a light brown, which is far darker than the tan. I was about to call it a dark brown, but it is only dark by comparison. It's very light. Not quite chocolate brown, more of a desaturated. This light brown that I've got actually makes for a very nice darker skin tone, like the highlight for a darker skin tone. Just needs a little red. Missed the spot. Right, I will need black, green, and the dark brown. Can I focus on the wet palette? Nope, I can't, never mind. I was hoping to show you what I was getting up to. I'm just mixing some black into the light brown that I had a moment ago. Hopefully create a slightly more interesting colour than just plain black. Although this is actually a fairly interesting black. I do have a very kind of jet black it's a Citadel one actually. Nearly ruined everything there. Way too much water. I think these, the legs of this particular model are 3D printed from image, something from Thingiverse. I'm testing out quite a few different ways of making torsos and bodies and legs because I want to use up all of the great many arms and heads that I've ended up with over the years. Which is, unsurprisingly, a substantial amount. Let's get the helmet done. Gorgeous rich green. Nice and dark without being too desaturated. Although I'll be throwing a wash over this, so it'll end up looking pretty dirty, so painting the rim of these helmets has always been a little awkward, particularly when you thin your paints too much. Let's try that again. There we go. I find I have to go all of the way underneath, even to the parts where it's not ever going to be visible, because otherwise the paint doesn't kind of stick to the very edge, the very brim, which is awkward. And the all-important dark brown for belts and pouches. Sometimes boots, but I've done the boots with the black. Not sure if any of this frame is in focus. Oh, I went to so much effort to sculpt in that belt, or the strap over the shoulder. It's fine. entirely unhelpful. Basically, the very second I put paint on the brush, like I can reshape the brush. As soon as I touch the paint, it opens out again. It is more than a little annoying. Yay! Nearly killed the rifle though. Need to be careful with these. Very, very long, thin parts of models. What was that? Just fold yourself up and go everywhere except where I want. It's not helpful. Yeah, I think that's done. I do want to just clean up that strap on the back. I assume that's as good as it gets. Model needs is my custom dark brown ink wash all over. this will do is this will bring out all of the imperfections from my sculpt and just make every mistake completely noticeable. I mean, that's not too bad. There we go, that's the tones of the model pretty nicely sorted out. Did you see that? Did that come out on camera? This brush just folded itself up rather than, you know, behaving like a brush. I have to admit that this model does kind of look like he's just wearing a towel around his waist, rather than a uniform shirt. Oh well. Close enough. Alright, let's pop this one off. And move on to number 2, who's not playing long, just like everything else it seems. This guy, actually this guy has the torso and legs is all 3D printed as one piece, and you'll notice he is very tall. And I'm not sure entirely why, but the something to do with the STL that I found was probably a different scale. I mean, these are The Warlord Games models are 2832s, so this would be like a 35 or not quite 40, but tall, very tall. And I've then that, great. Is there enough paint here to mix back in? Only just. That's not the colour I wanted. I wanted ochre. So let's get. That is a lot of ochre. Well, I'll be using ochre on the next one as well then. Well, whatever colour I've ended up is whatever colour this model will be. This one wasn't particularly accurate, uniform for the era I'm going for, but I think it suits close enough. It's that kind of thing where in an army of 50 models it's fine, but if you actually picked it out and had a closer look, you're like, this isn't quite the right uniform. Because the one of the uniforms that the Soviets used during World War II was a quilted jacket, often paired but not always with a quilted trousers, and that kind of quilted style visually is very similar to older Gambeson, which would be kind of different materials but sort of the same construction methods, many layers sewn together and then stitched down in patches, in not patches but like strips. Yeah, if you see the lines down there, that's sewn together down these strips to make sure that the material doesn't bunch up or kind of fold in ways that you wouldn't want it to. It worked then, it works now. And visually it's kind of the same. It's, like I say, different material. And this is for keeping you warm rather than actually stopping weaponry getting in, because not many people are using axes on the battlefields of World War II. There were a few, but it's mostly, well, I say it's mostly the firearms, but it's mostly the artillery, really. If you can shoot them from far enough away that they can't see you, that would seem sensible. So I've mixed that tan in with a little more of this black. Print didn't really come out very well around the legs, so I'm kind of making up where the boots are. I just kind of paint a line there. I can say that the line of the boots, the line of the actual boots in the print is just a fold in a much taller pair of boots. And we'll see how effective that is when I paint the boots. Until then, I can't necessarily be sure. Yeah, I do think I went a bit too dark for the trousers here. I can always lighten that up. Let's see what I can do about these boots. Pretend boots. Just dropping the brush as well. Not only is this brush fraying, it's also attacking me. How rude. How very rude. Looks okay. I think the very dark trousers did spoil it somewhat. Definitely need to lighten up. How much? And with what colour? See if I can get a little bit of a glaze going on. That's way too thick for a glaze. These sort of working. How's that? Yeah, that's much better. We shall see how the wash treats that that colour. Hopefully, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Can't really tell until it happens. This brush. Come on. Flaying out in two opposite directions. Well, this is supposed to be my good brush. This is the one I spent all that money on. Really wish I hadn't. It's an absolute waste. See if I can fix any of this. Not with paint that thin on. There we go. Hello, Foxy Mitts. Pint along. Drinking game edition of painting. Ah. Well, that doesn't help. I have corrected the title. Thank you for correcting my spelling. My paintbrush has absolutely betrayed me today. It's fraying in just about every way that it's possible to fray, and I'm pretty sure some ways that it's technically impossible, but it's doing it anyway. There we go. Clumping in a solid lump and not depositing any paint. Yes, I will tell you what I'm painting. I'm painting some more bolt action models, particularly. Let's do a refocus. Let's have a closer look. I've got some models where I'm using the plastic arms, weapon, and head that are spare that come with the kit, and then I'm been making some torso and legs. So this one's a 3D printed one. The tunic for some of the Russian models has this kind of quilted pattern. This is for the to keep you warm up in Siberia, because you're going to need it. And the body here, which also has these, they're not quite the same, they're a little bit shallower. Yeah, you can just about see it on the chest there in the shadow. It has the same kind of thing, because that's a gambeson. This is a medieval torso and legs. And the gambeson and the quilted uniform of the Soviets is similar enough. I also have this one, which has just been through the wash, the brown wash, and needs to get some highlights, particularly the skin and the metal hasn't been done there. But this one, again, plastic arms, weapon and head. 3D printed the legs, but all of the torso and the shirt is stuff that I've sculpted myself. And you can see that it's not perfect by a long way. I threw on some of the bags and pouches from the kind of the dog sits alone. I've thrown on some pouches from the spares of the kit, because it just makes it look a bit better rather than having this kind of texture everywhere. But once I throw 60 or 100 of these down on the table, no one's looking that closely, so it's probably fine. I've got the nicer looking ones for command staff and the NCOs, and these not quite as good looking ones will be the general troopers and artillery crews. Do I need a new brush? Well, I've been through 3 brushes recently and they all behave in pretty much the same way. And they just open out way too quickly. And I've cleaned them, and you know, all the fancy soaps and keeping them wet between paints and all the rest of it, and it just, none of it works. It just always, it's like, just like that. That's opened out into basically every hair separate, and that's immediately after having shaped it. But yeah, all my brushes do the same, and it's quite annoying. It makes it very difficult to paint. Yeah, and again, straight away. That lasted about 30 seconds. I've even put some of these brushes into acetone to make sure they are absolutely clean. Doesn't damage the glue. Some people says, oh, you can't use acetone, it'll damage the glue. Depends on what glue. Hog hair brushes, you can't use acetone. Say what hair you usually can. Different colour for the rucksack. Grey? Are we thinking grey? I'm thinking grey. I should do the weapon stock first, and then I can mix the brown with the grey to make an interesting colour. Yes, it is quite annoying. I think the first time I cleaned this particular brush, I used the soap, scrubbed it all in, cleaned it all out, left it, and it was nice and sharp, just like it should be, just like that, nice and sharp. And then as it was drying, like no paint, nothing touching it, just laying on the table, as it was drying, it just opened up. I'm like, thanks. Could I re-glue it? Probably. Don't know the process for don't know the how you actually make a brush, but I'm sure I'm capable of it. I don't know what chemicals, what types of glue. It's often the problem. It's not necessarily having glue; it's having the right type of glue. I know some people steam brushes, but I don't know if that's sable hair, if that's horsehair. Might be horsehair. Kind of, you get it wet, clamp it into a point, and then steam it. But I'm not sure if that would work with this type of brush. That's a fairly interesting grey. Kind of a creamy brown. Yeah, stay in a point, please, brush. That. I think I need to do the skin. Yeah, just the skin on this one, and then the wash. As I'm cleaning it, pulled it into a point and just pinged back open. That's all of the way down to the bottom. This brush is dead. It's about time I split that and make it my new dry brush. Change focus. Apparently not. Right, this is a much bigger brush, so this is going to be harder to get into the details. Actually, this is a tiny, really short brush, but it's wider. Rest in peace, brush. No, rest in hell. Rest in absolute torment. Suffer for the suffering you have caused me. Grandpa Werewolf, hello, how you doing? I've just thrown one of my brushes into the bin. Actually, I haven't thrown it into the bin, it's still right here, but it has been causing me problems. And so I've changed over to my really, really, really wide brush. A very short, very wide brush, which is kind of useless for most things, to be honest. It does like base coating very well, because being fairly short but fairly wide, you can pretty much cover a whole model fairly quickly. But just not with any detail. As if to prove the point, I'm going to try and paint in the chin strap for the helmet. Paint dries just so quickly on this brush. It's too small for detail work. Yeah, and I've got it all over his face. And yeah, that's a disaster. Absolute disaster. Didn't even get all the strap. It's fine. It's good enough. So yeah, that's done. Brown wash. That's black. That's brown. Connection issues somewhere. Everyone seems to have dropped off. See, this brush is excellent for doing this kind of thing, just throwing a wash over the entire model, because I can put loads of wash in the wide part of the brush and just stamp it down. Okay, people are still here. Must be just my end then, or some incorrect number somewhere on YouTube side of things. Yeah, maybe it's the lag then. Oh wow, okay. Over a minute. Given my bitrate, I use a very low bitrate because this camera and this camera, they're not really... Oh, Werewolf is still here, good. Between these two cameras, they're not really high detail, high focus, and so there's no point having like super high bit rate. Also, I'm not like streaming games where high frame rate is important, so I've got it set pretty low. Gonna need more wash. I'm gonna actually need to make up another batch of wash at some point, because since I made this, can you see the level? I'm going to hold it level and just hold the paintbrush. It's about there when it's level. Obviously I have to tilt it to show the camera, but that's how much I've got left, and this was completely full. And I don't use wash that often. I guess I use the other one, the black wash, I use on my Tanith First, but only for the uniforms. And then for the Soviets, I use pretty liberal coat on everything, but everything else that I paint, I very rarely use washes. My internet connection says I'm here, but I'm actually AFK. face. Make sure that the impressions of the eyes and the mouth get a little bit of the wash, because that will then massively help me out when I come to paint in the face later on. Did I get everything? Sorry, I'm drifting out of frame. Somehow, and it's very interesting because I didn't use any green, but somehow these trousers, you can just about see it on the camera as well, they look green. I used tan. No, I didn't. I used ochre. I used ochre and black. Actually, I used the tar black and there is green in that. But then I painted, I kind of glazed ochre over the top, which is a reddy brown. So the fact that the green is showing through on the trousers there, that's impressive. Yeah. Right. Back to my first one with my custom sculpted torso and plastic arms, head and weapon, like a khaki green. Yeah, it is that kind of very military style desaturated browny green. It suits. It's a good shade, but I'm just surprised that the green is showing through, given that I didn't really use any green. Like, just for context, this is the black with the green in it, and like, you can, if you know it, you can see just a hint of green, but it's still pretty much just black. And then over the top of that was the, well, mixed in and then layered over the top was the ochre, which is that. And there's definitely no green in there. This is kind of orange, red and yellow. Where was I? Oh yeah, skin. Now this brush is going to be useless for the skin. I mean, it's fine for moving paint onto the palette, so I'll do that first. So I'm going to go back to my traitorous brush for this bit. We'll see if it can hold together long enough to do a nose. So I think I'm drifting off that way, so if I move the camera there, I should stay in frame a bit better. Oh well, it's off to a good start. So I'm mixing in a little of the ochre with the skin tone for the first layer. That has gone even worse than I was fearing. That brush just opened out and filled in all of the crevices, which is the opposite. Rather than painting the high spots, which is what I'm aiming for, It's opening out and painting both of the low spots on either side. Right. This other brush is an absolutely huge brush. By comparison, this new one is like probably 4 or 5 times the volume. Let's see if this one can maintain a sharp point for more than 3/8 of a second. Well, I can get it to a nice sharp point. Let's see if that sharp point lasts any length of time. Although this does quite nicely prove a point that I've made several times, that nearly bent the rifle again. That sharp brush is more important than a small brush when you're painting small details. And if anything, a larger brush would be helpful. Well, this is certainly behaving better than the other one. Although, it's drying out very quickly, which doesn't make sense because it's such a large brush, it should be staying wet for longer. Why is everything drying out so quickly? I put loads of water into this brush. There you go, now everything's thinning down too much. That's definitely enough water. I think I'm going to have to go back for some black wash to fix, sorry, brown wash to fix the low spots here, because that brush ruined everything. Actually sure if that helped any. Well, let's abandon that, let it fully dry, and then I'll come back and see if I can poke it around some more. In the meantime, let's get some non-metallics on the rifle. Haven't painted a whole bunch recently, and then I come back to this. Like, stop mucking around. Right, that's the all the metalwork done in grey. Let's grab some black. I'll at least put a couple of reflections in various places, so that looks absolutely awful. Fix it. Let it dry, come back. Use a bit of the panel lining. If anything, when it comes to the non-metallics on this, panel lining is the most effective technique of all of it. Wet blending is useful. Right, white. So now do basically the opposite. Well, the same thing but with the opposite colour. Let's get a matching stripe that is not even remotely a matching stripe. Brush wars, the traitor legions, good brushes gone bad. Yes, the point being the point is the point. If I could just have a single decent brush that came to a perfect point every time. Is of course the ideal. Where did my white? You used up all that white already. Look at this other brush. I put that down for a few minutes and look at it. Oh no. A reality show where brushes have to go through challenges to be deemed the best brush. That sounds... I mean, I would love to do that as a parody video. Just absolutely making fun of awful television. That sounds funny. But I don't actually want to have to go through the process of making it. Also, if I made it, no one would watch it, so... yeah, this brush comes to a nice point, but it doesn't want to either pick up or deposit paint at all. I don't know why. Well, that is pretty much how I've been doing most of the non-metallics on this army. Well, I've got my white. Let's get some eyes. On the bayonet we go a bit darker. Old Rear Baron, so blackened to prevent erosion. Rust bluing, yes. However, I would like some very bright reflections. So maybe in the kind of here and here, the interim, and then further down, darken it there. Without spoiling the effect I've already got. I don't want to go too much darker than that. I do want it to be a fairly white effect. Because this army will eventually be based on snow. As soon as certain someone, who shall not be named, Ratman, remembers to bring down the snow. And also remembers to take the ABS up to Foxymas. There are so many different protective treatments and coatings for metal. One of the more common ones during the kind of late 1800s up to the early 1900s would have been rust bluing, which is more black than blue, but it's called rust bluing. And it's literally a layer of iron rust, a very, very thin controlled layer of iron rust around the surface, that is then converted to ferroferric oxide, I think it is, which doesn't continue to rust. Iron oxide will expand, creating holes for moisture to get further into the metal, and it will also allow moisture to get through it. Whereas ferroferric oxide and various bluing compounds that you can add in help with this, prevent the moisture from going any further. It's actually what aluminium does naturally. If you get pure aluminium, leave it out, it'll dull. Like, it'll start off perfectly shiny and then it will dull down. But it's only a very thin layer on the surface, and if you scratch it, you'll suddenly become shiny again. Whereas steel, if left to rust naturally, will go orange, kind of red or orange, and expand, go puffy, and that's when it breaks apart. That explanation might not be perfectly accurate, but it's kind of cursory interest level correct, probably. Is it ferroferric? Not sure if that's. Not sure if I called that compound correctly. But yeah, there's so many different techniques to protect metal. Galvanized is another one. It was used in some countries. I assume it's still done today. In some parts of the world, for certain applications, it depends on the application. Actually, oh, Wandering Kelp. Hi, I didn't realise that was a separate person talking. I have the habit of not looking at people's names. I should be more deliberate about that. Yeah, I assume for certain applications it is actually still done. I am fairly certain that toy company Hasbro, that certain members of the chat are very familiar with, uses galvanized, shiny silver looking screws, so galvanized steel, for the screws on the inside of their Nerf guns, and they use rust blued, which look black, on the outside. Let's get trigger guard is really hard to get to, and it's like just a shiny spot on it will not be enough. Yeah, the front of the drum's looking a bit too scratchy. So let's get some of that slightly darker and see if I can glaze that. That's a bit better. The night, Foxy Mitts. Have a good sleep. Have a fun being unconscious. See, there are certain parts of this that just kind of descend into edge highlighting. I did say in one of my videos that the non-metallics that I'm kind of doing here, if you paint it grey, give it a black wash, and then just edge highlight it white, you get 90% of what I'm able to achieve in like 10% of the time. Let's see, I definitely want some darker in. Oh, I've run out of black. Hey, they're playing my song. So, darkest spots in the air vents, or like the gaps in the barrel shroud. Bit darker there, a bit lighter on the other side. Yeah, just about. Clean up that, clean up that, and then white. I've bled over with the dark in some of these spots, particularly that one is way too big. There. Otherwise, the top of that looks fairly good. So let's fix that. dark steel, light silver. I actually, from an aesthetic point of view, I much prefer darker metals just in general. Like when it comes to like gold or yellow metals, I would rather have like copper or brass. Like brass looks so much nicer to me than gold. And then with the kind of grey metals, similar sort of thing. Steel, much prefer the kind of the steel looks to like a parkerized or a rust blued steel. Much rather have that than a really shiny silver. I've just painted some of that grey onto his hand. His hand is now made from metal. Like the Midas, but with steel. Probably get into that trigger guard from this side. Yeah. It's gonna need black. Kind of difficult to get at, but yeah, it's not that visible. Let's give it let's grab some more white and give it a specular highlight. I just started calling it a flecular highlight because fleckle highlight. Once the snow's on, like, it looks great from that angle. Just about. The moulding at the top isn't as kind when it comes to this kind of effect. That's definitely not what I wanted to do. Let's go again. That's better. Iron Hand Edition. Oh yeah, he's joined the Forces of Chaos. Marvellous. Lovely armour painter bronze that works well. Strangely, the best metallic paint that I've ever had is this. And it's in a Revell pot, but it's not a Revell paint, because this was just an empty pot that I had. I cleaned it out and put this paint in. But that, particularly if you paint this over like dark brown base layer, this, and then like a black wash, absolutely beautiful look. Do I have, I might have it on some of my Tanith models. What have I got over here? Yeah, here we go. Missile launcher has... where's the focal range? There it is. The Aquila there in that kind of rose gold. But that gold, the reason why it's in a different pot to what it came with, is it's a craft paint. And I think it was a 500 milliliter tube that it came in, and we split it between a couple of us, and I just happened to have that pot, so I dumped some in. Lazy? Yes. Bolt gun Necrons and flesh wash. See, the thing about non-metallic metal, Werewolf, is that it does require all of the fundamentals of painting, but just about any technique requires the fundamentals of painting. And so it's got this mystique about it. Like, oh, non-metallic metal is such an expert's technique. Is like, I don't think it is. I think once you've done a few models, like once you literally, from never having paint 5 or 10 models and then give non-metallics a go, I genuinely think most people are capable of it, or at least to the cartoony style. Like I paint with a very cartoony style of non-metallic metal rather than the hyper stylized effect. I just realized I didn't paint the skin on this guy. Like, I gave it the base coat and the wash. I haven't actually painted any skin tone. Oh, I've got a bit left over from the last model, so let's just quickly get some skin tone down, see if I can't ruin the eyes that I just did. This is my old version of painting handle, and it's got the wrong springs in it because I nabbed all the good springs for my newer one. But these bolt action models have these weird flat bases, and I was half tempted to completely rebase them on the more normal, like hollow raised bases, but then I realised I'd end up with like 100 or something of these flat disc bases left over. Just can't be bothered really, so I just put them on. They're kind of they're different, but fine. It's just a tiddlywink with delusions of grandeur. It is a piece to play a game with. Well, that's I mean, it's nearly a face. Let's get just a touch more of the Caucasian paints. And just do one last highlight on the nose and get this cheek a bit. That's better. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine. That's kind of about as much effort as I was willing to expend on these two. I'll probably be wrapping up in a few minutes, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll answer them before I close up the stream. This brush does come to a much nicer point. I should paint with this brush more often, I think. What was this? This is the Pure Red Sable Germany. I'm not sure if that's a no brand one or something. I've not heard of that before. I'll have to look them up. This one, the Raphael, has not impressed me. It occasionally comes to a sharp point, but it doesn't stay sharp. It breaks apart and frays. And the Winsor & Newton, it was way too small to begin with, but like that's not a sensible shape for a brush. I have used this one quite heavily, so it's probably a little unfair to criticize it as heavily as the others, but yeah, I got the wrong size. I might be tempted to get another Winsor & Newton, but the size 2 is pathetic. I would need a size 3 or 4 or 5, 4 or 5. Let's go. So here we go. My 2 models that I've painted in basically 2 hours. Both of these are the plastic arms, weapon and head from Warlord Games Bolt Action Soviets. This is the summer uniform and this is the quilted uniform. And then the torsos and legs. The quilted uniform has a 3D printed torso and legs, and this one has 3D printed legs, and then I sculpted the torso myself, which is the first. This is the first torso I've ever sculpted, and you can see that it's a little lumpy. I need to work on smoothing out my my miller part. Particularly, it's been very cold, and so getting them to smoothing out the miller part in the cold is very difficult. Anyway, that is done. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will wrap up the stream. So I'll say thank you very much to everyone for coming. Thank you to Foxymits, Grandpa Werewolf, and Wandering Celt for joining in on the chat. And I hope you all have a very good evening. Goodbye.